Welcome back to CareCast, the podcast from Caresoft, the trusted government IT solutions provider. Subscribe to get the latest technology updates in the public sector. I'm Anthony Jimenez, your host from the Caresoft production team. On behalf of Caresoft and Fed Insider, we would like to welcome you to today's podcast, focused around cybersecurity and the current threat landscape. Eudora Fleischman, IT Infrastructure and Cybersecurity Division Manager of the City of Fairfield, California, Donald Hester, Cybersecurity Advisor of CISA, and Tony Giandomenico, VP of Global Security Consulting at Fortinet, will discuss the emerging types of cybersecurity threats and measures intended to counteract them.
And awaiting you on the other side of this incredible panel will be Taco Thursday. So please stay for us for a little bit and have some beverages and some food as we conclude our presentations today. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible experience, and this panel will be even more powerful, if it's possible, than the last two, because it permeates every aspect of technology, and that, of course, is cybersecurity and the current threat landscape. And we have three incredible panelists here today to talk about cybersecurity and to give you their insights into how federal, state, and local and territorial agencies are facing their cyber threats and what they're doing about them every day. Bad actors are becoming more insidious, looking for ways to infiltrate software supply chains and avoid detection. And they're unfortunately having a lot of success. And many state governments, like those in California, are making progress in implementing zero trust architectures and other capabilities to protect against these evolving threats and much more. Today, our esteemed panel will explore how agencies are tackling cyber threats to physical infrastructure, guarding against software supply chain vulnerabilities, and providing secure services to their residents. So let's meet our speakers. First is Eudora Fleischman. Eudora is IT Infrastructure and Cybersecurity Division Manager for the City of Fairfield, California. Hi, welcome, Eudora. Good to see you. Donald Hester is Cybersecurity Advisor for the San Francisco Bay Area Region 9 for CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency. Don, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Yep. And Tony Giandomenico. He's the Vice President of Global Security for Consulting and Fortinet. Hi, how you doing? Good to see all of you. Eudora, we're going to start with you, if you don't mind. And just a reminder, if you haven't scanned the QR code, please do. If you want to ask any questions of our panelists, I'll try to monitor. And we'll also compile the questions so that if we don't get them answered here, we'll provide them to our experts, and then perhaps we'll get some answers for you at a later time. So if you haven't done so, just go there and you'll see it comes up, it pops right up. All right. So let's start. Eudora, sorry about that little interruption. One of the key areas of concern in cybersecurity is cyber attacks to physical infrastructure, such as water, energy, transportation systems. What are the main challenges and best practices that you are implementing in those areas?
Some of the main challenges that we're facing across our IoT, SCADA, applications, cloud environments, external points of presence. All of those things are challenging because they're all different. Some of it's legacy, especially when it comes to SCADA environments and NEICS environments. When you're talking just about traffic light controllers, some of the controllers in the streets could be as old as 20 years old. And then you have millions of dollars of controllers to replace out in your streets that previously weren't a big deal, but now it is a big deal. They're being used to attack your internal infrastructure. And it could actually be used to attack your internal virtual infrastructure, because a virtual server may control all those controllers and those traffic light switches and things like that. And the same with the SCADA infrastructure. So some of the best practices we're putting in place are at every layer of the stack, zero trust. And what does that look like at every layer of the stack? I guess it needs.
It's on. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. This automated voice detection thing is weird. Anyway, so using zero trust at your network layer might mean micro VLANing, things like that. And also introducing a different layer at your endpoint, device management, behavior analytics, and that's where you might introduce machine learning and AI, which has been around for a long time. And then at the application layer, you want to introduce, identity management, no matter what the identity is, and you want to also make sure that you have correlation of events all the way down to your endpoints. You want to make sure you have admission control across your environments. No device is trusted, period. It may mean a longer time to get it up, configured, and implemented, but it's worth it if you can mitigate attacks, and it gives you visibility across your stack. Observability across your stack is really important, because if you can't observe it, you can't protect it, you don't know your posture, and you don't know what's going on. So all of those things are part of a best practice.
Does this mean that you have to hunt for those potential vulnerabilities? I mean, is that part of the process that you're actually looking? You talked about stoplights, so you're actually looking for those gaps in your system, yeah?
And the way that you look for those gaps in your systems is, number one, you want to have assessments at all those layers across your stack. And then you want to introduce technology that can actually do the heavy lifting for you. And also partner with external third parties like SIM providers and SOCs and NOCs. So as a government agency where you may have reduced staff, you're going to take advantage strategically of those different third-party providers that are safe, that are effective, that want to have long-term relationships with you, and you want to actually protect those relationships with really good, solid contracts with cybersecurity language built into your contract. So that way you understand who is the risk, the person who's going to take that risk within the contract if the vendor has a breach or anything like that. So you want to protect your environment and your enterprise.
A quick question. On that note, I work for a vendor. Are you guys getting a lot more sort of stricter on third-party validation stuff? Are you kind of assessing that vendor that's coming in to make sure that they're meeting your level of your overall cybersecurity program?
Yes, and there's a lot of tools now that are coming onto the market to assess third-party vendor risk posture. In other words, is this vendor, have they protected and mitigated all of these CVEs that were previously found across their product line and across their infrastructure or their cloud environment? And it's giving us those deep visibility reports that we can actually see real time, and then even a dashboard to share with the vendor. Hey, we see all of these vulnerabilities currently being reported. Have you fixed those, or what are your mitigation workarounds? It gives you that visibility so you can address it with your third-party vendor.
We get tons of requests now for that. So yeah, that really aligns with exactly what we're seeing. And it really helps us as well. I mean, we're making sure that we're at the standard everyone else is actually requiring us to actually be at.
Okay, I love it. All right. Don, I'm going to ask you to kind of explain your role as a CISA advisor.
Okay. Thanks for the question, because I think that's a really good one. CISA's role, and then I'll explain what my role is as it relates to that, but CISA's role is really to lead the effort for the federal government in making the United States cyber safe, right? At the end of the day, making us more resilient. And that includes infrastructure. It includes federal agencies as well. So we're focused on two areas. We're focused on the federal government, but we're also focused on critical infrastructure, which state, local, and territorial, and tribal, and education are all a part of critical infrastructure. So we're here to help you. And so a lot of folks don't necessarily know our role. Our role is not to be law enforcement, and our role is not to be regulatory. We're neither of those things. What we're really focused on is being your advisor, your consultant. We have physical security advisors, we have chemical advisors, we have elections advisors, and we have cybersecurity advisors. And so my role here in the region, and I cover from San Mateo County north to Mendocino County. My colleague Scott over here handles from Santa Clara down to Monterey. So if you're in those areas, we're here to help you. We're here to help you. The federal government has considerable resources for you, available to you, from everything from an assessment to external vulnerability scans, and we do all of it for free. We do tabletop exercises for free. So we can come in to your organization and help out. So my role is to be your contact, right, at CISA, to be your advisor.
I'm also taking advantage of all of those free services that CIS is giving us, including validated architecture review, where they're coming in and actually looking across our VLANs and all of our IoT endpoints and giving us information on our current posture and helping us to fix that posture if there are any gaps identified.
There you go. And the operative word is free. So thanks very much, Don. Tony, let's turn to you. What are some of the persistent cybersecurity challenges you see as a consultant and an advisor in the field, and you encounter, especially state and local governments, very different than the federal government? So talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we've hit on a few of them already. So I get an interesting view, right? I get an opportunity to see organizations at their worst, right? Because one of my roles is I have a team of incident responders across the globe that go in and help organizations through a crisis situation. So if they get hit with ransomware, if they got a nation state actor that's in their environment, my team goes in to identify where they're at and how to eradicate them out of that environment. And when we looked at, some of the factors that contributed to the success of that particular incident, a lot of times it's a couple different things. A lot of times it's the technology is kind of there. The investments that they made is there. What's not there is a process that wraps around all that technology. What I mean by that, the process to really adequately be able to detect an adversary in the network. What are their actual their tactics, their techniques, their procedures? Once you do detect that, what's the analysis? How do you contain? What knobs, do you have available, to be able to turn to isolate that particular sort of threat actor? How do you remediate and recover? Most of the time, organizations kind of fumble through that a little bit. And I think that kind of dovetails into what we help them with and, building playbooks. You guys help with the playbooks and everything too? Take advantage of that stuff, because that for me, I see is key, because most of the organizations, the technology was there, the investments that they made, they might have got, some endpoint that alerted something, or, some other technology, but either one, they weren't looking at it, or they didn't understand it, and they really didn't have that step-by-step kind of playbook to be able to help them out. So that was probably one of the main things. I'd say the only other thing would probably be around, visibility into that environment. I can't tell you how many times, we follow the breadcrumbs and we try to find initial access into the network, and we come upon this external edge device. Let's say it's a Citrix server. We say, hey, what's this particular IP address, this asset here? It takes about 3 or 4 days for them to come back. So, that was something that was supposed to be decommissioned like maybe 6 months ago. So I think there's a lot of visibility aspects, and, I think you mentioned that. I think Muhammad Ali kind of, said it best: the hands can't hit what the eyes can't see. If you don't have that visibility into your environment, how are you even going to know the vulnerabilities and the actual threats that exist, in that environment? So those are some of the things that we kind of see.
So Red Hat, Black Hat investigations, you invite others to check your system out, see how impenetrable it is, or not?
Yes. I mean, from our side, right? I mean, we'll do offensive cybersecurity if they're interested in, right? We'll come in and kind of play either adversary emulation of, specific adversarial playbooks to see how well, they will actually sort of fare up against that. Most organizations, though, that kind of we work with aren't necessarily kind of always ready for that. I think there's probably a few steps, before, just to make sure they got the right playbooks, they got the detection capabilities. I know, real kind of like pet peeve of mine, not sure if that'll be kind of peppered in another question, but it's really around, I really feel organizations don't have a good sense of what their maturity capability is when it comes to identifying a particular adversarial technique. We have cybersecurity frameworks, we have all these different higher level frameworks. But if I were to ask an organization, hey, There's this ransomware as a service group, and they're using, some kind of technique to, establish persistency. Let's say they're loading a scheduled task from a group policy object in Active Directory. Will you be able to identify that? I usually get a bunch of, baby. So it's not a threat informed, defense. It's it's a defensive posture where they've followed this high level, these higher level frameworks, but I think it needs to dive in a bit deeper. And I think if there's a bit more focus in on that aspect of it, I think a lot of times the investments that are being made, you'll get more ROI out of that. And maybe that's where you might not have the experts, but like you were mentioning, you'll get external third parties that can come in, that can kind of partner with you. And now that's an extension of your IT and security team.
Great, thank you. All right, let's go back to you, Eudora. I want to talk about the zero trust architecture. That's probably a familiar term to many of you. Federal government has been initiating this and putting together for federal agencies a zero trust cybersecurity architecture. Some of that has filtered down to state and local organizations. Do you incorporate any of those platforms into your cybersecurity architecture?
Definitely. We started at pretty much the network layer, and we've been working our way up the stack. It's a journey. We started that process about 5 years ago. So we're fairly mature in the zero trust model. First off was I advise get an idea of all your real estate and all your assets. If you don't have a list of everything that is connected and can communicate, you've got a problem. That's step one. You've got to understand everything you have. If you can't understand it, you can't protect it. And then the next thing is identifying how everything is connected. Everything is sitting on some type of communication platform somewhere. And then you want to segregate those according to best practice at every layer of your stack. End nodes that have server OS, databases versus web servers. At the network layer, you're going to have IoT versus a virtual server environment versus a storage environment. You're going to have all these different VLAN types in your enterprise. And you want to make sure that you have visibility, not just northwest on your network, but you want north-south, but you want east-west. And so you may want to drop something right in the middle of your data center, in the middle of all your VLANs where they converge, so that you can sniff that, identify it, and then start locking down all those outbound communication traffics and identify what applications are running across your network. And as you strategically start to do those things, you can apply policies to the network layer for admission control, for different VLAN types and different, like a Sony CCTV camera versus a traffic light controller. You should know the differences, and they should have different policies allowing them to do different things. And those ports should be closed according to their function or open according to their function. And these types of holistic capabilities that you build in can be tool agnostic, because you want to look at what you want your end result posture to be, and you want to do it from a holistic approach. So that way you can keep up with the different threat types that are coming out. And then the other tools that are coming out from vendors, fast and furious, but useful ones, are tools that can then include generative AI to lay down the MITRE framework and look at your entire posture across your stack, from the network to your endpoints, to your cloud environments, to your SaaS environment, and then actually guide you and give you wizard-driven abilities to lock down those gaps in your MITRE framework across your stack on the different attack types.
Great. It's great information. And Don, I see you nodding your head because you're part of this, right? Maturity level. So what processes do you have in place? What other capabilities can you offer state and local organizations who want to go through the process that Eudora's describing?
I got two things I wanted to add to that. So my first thing is we have a thing called our cyber performance goals. How many of you have seen those on our website? Check them out. It's 34 controls that we have that we've identified based on incident responders and pen testers, that if these controls were in place, they have a high value in reducing risk. Things like multi-factor authentication, right? These 34 controls we think should be the baseline, right? So you should take a look at that, and everything that Eudora and Tony have been talking about here is on the cyber performance goals, right? All of those things are in there. Your ability to detect is super important, right? You don't know, we have dwell times of years for some threat actors, right? So what is your ability to detect? That's pretty scary to think that they've been in there for a long period of time. That gives them a lot of time to really get in there and get into every other system that's there, or exfiltrate data, or whatever else. So your ability to detect is really good. So check out our cyber performance goals. It's made for IT and OT environments. It covers both of those environments because the principles are the same. Just like Eudora said, our first question is, do you have an inventory of everything, right? You can't protect it if you can't see it. We also have, and of course, all of this is voluntary. Again, like I said, we're not regulatory. We're not telling you have to do it, but you can give us a call, and we will go through the questionnaire with you. And as an auditor, I think it's a good thing, because sometimes you'll say yes to a question and I'll say, but do you do this? And they'd be like, oh no, I guess I don't do that, right? So some of the questions that may be a little bit deceiving, you may think they're a little bit higher level than they actually are. The other thing that we do, or my second thing here, is another thing that we have is, again, voluntary. It's something that we provide. It's our Zero Trust Maturity Model. It's a roadmap to get you there. One of the things I had is being an auditor for 25 years before I went to the city of Livermore and then before I came here, I would be out on doing assessments on a regular basis, and I'd ask the same questions every year and got the same questions. Like, do you change default passwords, right? That's been in the press a lot because a lot of incidents have been happening. I've been asking that question for 25 years. Why is this still a problem, right? Why are we still having this, right? So again, we want to look at this zero trust model, and we want to make sure that we're looking at, we have the 5 pillars, because we talk about your identity, we talk about your device, your application, your workload, and also your data, right? Zero trust is not about network segmentation, right? Because every time I talk to somebody, we segment our network. That's not enough, right? We have to look at it at the whole stack, right? That's what we want to do. Our Zero Trust Maturity Model will help you with that and can guide you through the process of moving. We're not expecting you, like Scott said, it's not like you're going to be tomorrow, you're going to be perfect. You're going to have this upward spiral, right? I like that, Scott. I'm going to use it from now on. But that's a good idea, right? It's a cycle. It's a continuous process of continuously getting better. And that's what we use the models for, is to help you get there. And we're here to help, right? So that's me.
I like it. And before there was zero trust, there was something called identity management. So, Tony, I want to ask you about identity management. How can organizations use identity management to its fullest advantage?
Yeah, so I'm really not the defender guy, really. So I'll probably hold those questions to a lot of the experts here. But one thing I wanted to mention really quick, what you were saying, I think a lot of the stuff that you both were saying, I think it's key to note that stuff takes time. Right. And I think in a world of instant gratification, someone kind of mentioned something about their kind of kids. My daughter, she's got an attention span about right here. So we want instant kind of gratification with everything, right? You have social media and everything. And I think these types of things, they take a bit longer to do. What I found, and I'm sure you're probably doing these things also, you do them in phases so you get wins, right? So kind of leadership sees, okay, you got there, I got there, kind of getting wins. It's the same thing when you're implementing the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you're operationalizing that. So I just kind of wanted to acknowledge that, because I think that's a key, it's kind of a barrier, I think, sort of sometimes from organizations say, oh, that's just way too much, I don't want to invest in that, let me just kind of buy XYZ products. So I think that was important. On the identity piece, the thing that I wanted to just make sure I got across to everybody, and I think you were kind of sort of alluding to this thing here real quick, is hackers are logging in to the environment. So we look at initial access into the network. When we looked at the first half of this year, all of our investigations, when we did the actual kind of data metrics and the trends, 60+% initial access, they've already had access. So somehow either they got them on the darknet through some of the brokers, maybe they were there from other successful breaches, where they stole data. So they got the right username and passwords. They're getting into the environment. even if they have multi-factor authentication. There's kind of ways to be able to circumvent that type of stuff. You remember, how many times has T-Mobile been breached? 3 or 4 times in the last year or so. So you would imagine they probably got some interesting data. They probably might have, the data when you want to actually kind of port your SIM card over to another, phone. They're going to ask you certain questions, right? Well, they might already have that data, the adversaries. So we've seen a lot of sort of SIM jacking, where if you're using 2-factor, on your phone, the adversaries could, do some SIM jacking, and then they actually can get your 2-factor. So there's lots of ways around that, but they're getting in with the right access, to begin with. They're just logging into the environment, whether it's through a Citrix server, some VPN, whatever you make available for your users to log in remotely, they're already getting in there. The thing with that is they can hide within the noise. Right? I mean, the network's very noisy, so they can hide in there. And what we're seeing, the kind of typical playbooks where they're running certain techniques, like maybe accessing the LSAS process to extract credentials and things of that nature, those are opportunities for the defender to be able to detect that stuff. They're foregoing that because they don't really need to. They're basically hands-on kind of keyboard, right? Logging in from device, to device through RDP, whatever, remote thing you might have, AnyDesk, in the environment, or maybe they've downloaded that and they've used that. So we see a lot of that type of activity. So I think it's important for all these things about network segmentation, identity management, zero sort of trust, make it a lot more difficult. Even if the adversary gets the right username and password, make it a lot more difficult for them to be able to bury themselves and move around the actual environment. I think you mentioned something about behavioral stuff too. I think that's another one. Do you have the ability to be able to identify when a user or an entity is behaving outside of its normal behavioral pattern? If you do, that's awesome. Most companies don't have that kind of capability. A lot of SIM technology now is a lot of AI and everything is making it a lot more easier to be able to do that. But those are some of the things to sort of, think about, because along those same lines, I guess the point I'm trying to make, when you look at the overall offensive security playbook that they're actually leveraging, they're foregoing a lot of those actual kind of techniques. They're a little bit more sort of stealthier. Even there's been some cases, we've experienced this year and last year, they've completed an entire ransomware cyber mission, never used malware at all. Not once, right? And, you probably have most of the tools that you have in place are there to detect malware. They didn't use it at all. So those are some of the things I just wanted to get across. Kind of keep in mind, they're logging into the network already with the right credentials. So make sure you're kind of shoring up and you have, countermeasures, defensive countermeasures to be able to combat against that.
Fascinating and scary at the same time. Thanks very much. Great information. So Eudora, how are new technology capabilities? We spent a lot of time today talking about advanced, technology, AI and machine learning. So how does that impact you and your cybersecurity planning and operations?
Well, definitely. I'm already using the San Jose policy, thank you very much, to give to the executive leadership to distribute throughout the city. It's still, they're still reviewing. But for me, it's identifying where it's going to be used, what tool sets is machine learning versus generative AI being built into. Are my current providers and vendors of my cyber tool set building those things in? And then I want to go back and I want to identify where are their LLMs being created? What are the models that their Gen AI is learning from? Where do they sit? Are they in the geographic United States? Are they using FedRAMP environments for GCC tenants? Are they making sure that they're guarding against AI poisoning and bias and other things that I need to be aware of? I also need to start building into my contracts when I identify vendors that are going to be using generative AI, which is a bit a lot different than machine learning based AI. Just like Google gives you their third-party processors, I want to understand their third-party Gen AI providers of LLMs, of large language models, and how they're being developed. And I want to contractualize that and put that language into a contract with these vendors at the time of renewal. The way I see it helping me in my job every day and my team's job every day is automating some of the things that we may have trouble with, vetting things against the MITRE framework, being able to identify that within my stack. A Gen AI tool built in, like I was talking about earlier, would give me that visibility and make it wizard driven and help me in that. So strategic use of it within my cyber tool set, I see it being very helpful and moving forward. And then on top of that, for the rest of the business and the enterprise, making sure that the decision makers are still following the guideline and framework of best practice, that you have to identify the risk, assess the risk. You have to make sure that the right language is built into your contracts to legally protect and support your organization. And then you want to be able to keep track of that and have your risk register associated with this new technology type. I don't see the difference happening here in the best practice when it comes to a cybersecurity practice and program for an enterprise. You're going to do all those same things, and you just want to make sure that it applies, and it's not so fast that it's bypassing all of those safeguards that have been mature and built in to your environment.
Tony or Don, did you have a comment?
I just like that. I mean, I think that hit home. That hits home really well, because I remember, I'm a little bit older, but I remember when VM, environments were just kind of coming out. I was like, well, how do we protect against that? I'm like, just the same darn security controls that are in place today. So it's awesome that you mentioned that, because it's the same thing. I mean, obviously you're going to have to look sort of differently, but it's the same fundamental security controls.
Great. Well, speaking of security controls, that's your cue, Don. How do you recommend state and local governments identify and manage cyber risks associated with third-party application tools becoming more and more of a topic of conversation? What's your guidance on that?
So I have two things on that one too. So, and it kind of dovetails off of what Eudora was talking about earlier as well, in that you have third parties that you rely upon, right? We call them sometimes external dependencies. That's outside of your control, but you have to exercise some level of control on those folks to make sure that they're implementing the security, because they have either your data or you're relying upon their service, whatever that service is. And so when you talk about third parties, that's a really broad blanket, right? Because we're talking about everything from supply chain to cloud service providers to your utilities. Those are very different creatures, right? At the end of the day, but if you think about the critical functions that you have within your organization and what it takes for a city to run, or a county, or whatever organization you're at, whatever your critical functions are, you're relying upon a lot of third parties, right? And so how do you make sure that they're resilient, right? When's the last time you talked to your utility? I know Roseville has a utility. They are a utility. But when's the last time you talked to your utility, right? Where are you on their priority list for recovery, right? Good question to ask them. What is in your contractual language, like Eudora was talking about do they do third-party assessments? Do you have access to that audit? Or some type of SSAE 16 or 18 or whatever mechanism they had to validate their security posture, are you asking for it? What about your procurement process? Is security a part of the consideration? I know when I was working for a city, it was a tough thing because, it was part of municipal code. These are the things you have to look for, and security was not one of those things listed in there. So you got to get that listed in there. When you have two vendors and they're both the same price, do you pick the one that's more secure or the one that's least secure? Right? You pick the one that's the most secure. So if that's not even a part of your municipal code or a part of your procedures, is it going to get done? right? So, and that kind of dovetails into the fact that I talked to you about the cyber performance goals. That's a couple of the questions that are in there about how you manage your third parties. We have another assessment that we do. It's a little bit longer, more in depth. And we take one critical function that you have and then we assess it and we look at all the external dependencies that you have related to it. And we go through much more at a deep level. Does your contracts language specifically ask this question, this question, this question? Do you have a relationship with those entities, right? And at the end of the day, you have to push back at them. Right? You have to push back to them and say, we really are looking for these types of things. And somebody had said earlier on an earlier panel, when all of us as one voice say, we want you to have security by default and secure by design, and when we all start to ask for it, that's when it's going to happen. Until that happens, we're going to continue to have vendors that we either have to legislate and say that they have to do it, or hope that they're going to do the right thing, right?
In addition to that guidance, are there actual tools that CISA puts out that would help?
We have guidance, and then we have the assessment.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Tony, you next. How are state and local organizations implementing micro-segmentation that you talked about earlier? And what are the benefits or challenges associated with that approach?
I think the one thing I wanted to talk about here is, one of the things that we've seen, the value or the lack of segmentation, and the way that, traffic patterns actually flow in your environment. I'll ask the question here: should any communications happen between one endpoint, to another endpoint? I guess the answer is no, right? I mean, maybe there's some edge cases. In I would say almost 100% of all of our investigations, when we looked at the adversarial lateral movement, a lot of it was endpoint to endpoint, right? So there's some quick wins that I think you can get. One, with segmenting your environment, but then also, developing certain, detection logics where you can say no endpoint should be communicating with another endpoint. I mean, what about, critical assets that are maybe external facing? Maybe they have a little bit of communication back into a database or something like that or what have you, but probably shouldn't have access into any of the other assets, locking that down there. As well, even Active Directory. I know when we, endpoints have to do some authentication with Active Directory and what have you, but there should be no administrative, communication to Active Directory at all. So I think it goes back to look at the investments, I think, that you've already made. There's probably things that you can do. You're going to have to put some skin in the game. You're going to have to either have your, your staff be able to do these things. So it's time. Time is money. Or you'll hire someone to come in and do that. But there's a lot of things that you can do with the investments that you currently made that, really shouldn't actually kind of cost you much. So I don't really know. I don't work a lot with the actual sort of challenges of micro segmentation. You might be able to answer that a little bit more, but I do see a huge value in it that a lot of organizations still do not do, because, you talked about reducing the amount of ports and everything. And once again, it takes time. You can definitely do it. And you should be doing it, but most organizations that we see that had got hit with something didn't have anything there. They might have had either a flat network or they're allowing everything out, out the network and kind of blocking things kind of coming in, but everything was just kind of wide open.
I would add to what Tony said there. From my time in the military, some things that sometimes boggle my mind is we're talking about stuff that we've talked about for a long time, right? One of the things we talked about was you have to have a security clearance before you can get access to a certain thing, but then you also had to have a need to know, right? So there's two factors. It's not just because you have clearance that you have access to everything. You also had to have a need to know. This is no different than what Tony just said, right? At the end of the day, if that computer does not need to talk to that other computer, why does it have access to it? Right? And yes, that is challenging. I get that because a lot of the vendors, when we first did it, when the internet was first invented, when we first set up our networks, it was all open, right? So everything can connect to everything. Everything doesn't need to connect to everything at this point in time. And if that will prevent, lateral movement within your network, you can actually contain, and even if you get infected in one area of your network, you may prevent it becoming a larger scale issue so that the whole city doesn't go down. Just Public Works has an issue, right? Or maybe just one machine. That would be the better option, right?
Minimizing the impact of that breach.
Reducing the blast radius. There's a couple of things that are really great that you could use at every layer of your stack. Like I said, east-west traffic, sniffing, shutting down ports at the physical media layer. And then you get into your endpoint security. Why is PowerShell allowed to kick off on any end user desktop that isn't doing programming? Shut that off. Why do they need RDP? Shut that off. Why shut down, SMB2 for any devices that don't need to be talking to a storage device. Those types of things and policies that you put in place at your network layer, at your Active Directory, or whatever directory you're using at that layer, you can put those policies in place for your endpoints to be protected. And then you get into your cloud infrastructure, and then you can get into, and they have tools at the cloud level that can reach back into your infrastructure and take a look at that user behavior analytics of any device or any identity. And then you can start closing that down. And then when you get into SaaS third-party vendor sites that your organization is putting data into, you can actually monitor and maintain that as well. You can set up CASB to take a look at that, and your actual point of truth for authentication is going to be your own security schema as opposed to that third party's security schema. You can lock it down there at the cloud level and get all of that user behavior analytics and actual alerting you can put in, and you can take advantage of all of those cloud policies as well.
I got to tack on to this, man. We're on a roll here with things that we can do that without cost any money except for some time and effort. Got to roll up the sleeves and get in there.
That's right.
The other thing is, I think a lot of times for the folks who are hopefully not everybody on the network's the administrator. Hopefully that's kind of like taken care of, and your regular user, but your admin folks make sure that when they need to perform something that's administrative, they're escalating their sort of privileges, right? They're kind of going through that, and they're a regular user. The importance of that is, as an adversary, one of the things that they do when they get on the network, I kind of alluded to this before, and I talked about it, they want to be able to grab the credentials to be able to move laterally in the environment, right? Because you need three different things. You need a write access, right? You need to copy malware from one system to the other, and then you need to be able to execute that. So the first thing they want to do is grab the right credentials, and they'll look through, they can use things like, Bloodhound and everything else that will help you as an adversary identify what admins are logged in to what actual systems, and those are the ones they're going to go after. They get on those, they go into the LSAS process and grab those actual credentials. That gives them keys to the kingdom. From there, we've seen this happen so many times. Then they can they got the right sort of credentials. They'll go into the management systems of the endpoint. Say, EDR is huge these days. They'll log into the management, thing of EDR, and they'll basically either set exceptions, they'll actually just stop the actual, service, and then they'll run their things. Oftentimes, we'll come onto the site and say, hey, your particular endpoint, failed us, or this vendor technology failed us. It allowed it. Well, no, you let someone in, they went into the management console, they turned everything off, they, set exceptions. So just kind of keep in mind, there's a lot of things that you can do to make it a lot more difficult. Eventually they're going to get in. The adversary is eventually going to be able to do those things, but you're buying yourself more time, and you're buying yourself the ability to have an opportunity to detect them, because every time the adversary has to do something else, opportunity for the defender to be able to identify that. So
I'll tell you, I feel like I'm getting a PhD in cybersecurity today. This is all great information. I'm going to go through a couple topics pretty quickly. Eudora, I want to ask you about how the cyber insurance landscape has changed. We talked a little about it in the lobby. And what does that mean for your procurements? Do you have to prepare things, differently because cyber insurance priorities have changed?
Yes, in the last calendar year, I saw a difference a large difference in my audit last year on how many pages it was versus
Yep.
my audit this year and how many pages it is. And the type of probing questions that they ask have gone really deep, almost as much as my CGIS environment deep. Because right now, the cyber insurance landscape is looking pretty bleak. Insurance providers are getting out of the business, or they're cutting their customers off if after their audit they don't meet certain standards and they can't show attestation and data artifacts while they answer these questions. You can't just say, yes, I'm doing this. They want to see proof. You have to show them proof now. You have to print them reports. You have to, sometimes they want to get on the phone with the infrastructure manager and talk to you face to face. And then you have to do a screen share. So I've done that as well. But when you meet all these expectations, they continue to insure you. Your insurance has much less risk of going up as well, because cybersecurity insurance is escalating at a phenomenal rate. It's becoming almost untenable for everybody across private sector and public sector. So one of the things that, is good to demonstrate to the business is if you're insurable. That translates into money saved. That translates into protection against a ransom or an attack event when you have that cybersecurity in place.
And, I would add to that, you shouldn't look at those questionnaires as an onerous type of thing. The reason why they have those requirements, which, by the way, align with the cyber performance goals, and I know I keep on talking about those, but those things are known to reduce risk, right? At the end of the day, insurance companies don't make money by paying out claims. And so they know that if you implement those things, they're less likely to have to pay out claims, which is better for you, but that means you don't have a cyber incident, right? So at the end of the day, don't look at them as a bad thing. Look at them as a good thing. Use that as a baseline and say, we need to do these things. And if you need executive management support, what better thing because the federal government, I just say, hey, these are things you should consider. I can't force you to do any of them. But the insurance folks, they can say, well, no, if you don't do these things, we're not going to cover you, or our coverage will decrease, right? So they have a little bit more of a stick approach, and I'm doing more of the carrot approach.
Well, there's another CISA product that I'd like you to talk a little bit about, the CISA AI roadmap. We've talked a lot about AI today. What does that do for an agency?
So part of our role, as you know, CISA, we're in charge of, our mission is the cybersecurity and security just in general of the United States, right? So part of us is the physical security, part of us is cyber, and there's cyber. We want to make sure that you're all resilient, and part of that is making sure things are secure by design, right? So somebody had mentioned earlier that you have a very small voice when you go to a big corporation to say, hey, we want this secure by design. We have a little bit bigger of a voice, and so we're using that to really promote the idea of secure by design. And that's something that we're trying to, and again, we're not forcing the vendors to do that, but what we're asking them to do is to, if you're going to make something, make it secure from the beginning, right? And it doesn't matter what the new thing next year will be, right? Like somebody said, AI 5 years from now, everybody's not going to be talking about, they're going to be talking about whatever that is, and that'll be exciting. I'm really waiting to hear what it's going to be. But whatever it's be, we're going to be talking about the same cybersecurity related risks, right? So how do we get past that? Well, a part of that is just getting secure by design. So part of the roadmap that we have for AI, I'm glad that work groups are out there working on it. By the way, if you have a work group and you're working on something, we're at CISA, we want to be involved in it. We'll help you. We'll join your work group. Maybe we've already done some stuff, and maybe we can give you some of that information, right? Part of our roadmap for the AI in the federal government, we know there's a huge benefit to it. We also know everybody was already using it, right? And like somebody else said, you have a hard time telling your employees not to use it. They just do it on their own phone, and then they will be using it, right? So how do we know there's a great benefit to it, especially on the side of protecting our systems like Eudora was talking about. Have it do all the heavy lifting. What it's good for, right? It's good at looking for anomalies. I'm not that great at looking for anomalies. I'll look at a bunch of logs and I'll be like, yeah, it looks all right, right? But it can go in there and look at it and say, well, no, based upon, the last 100 days of this user's activity, that looks anomalous. That's the type of stuff we want to use it for, right? So we know there's a benefit. We also know there's a downside to it, right? Not only threat actors using it, but also just having bad information come out of it, bias information coming out of it, and then us relying upon that, right? So, the DMV, I forgot his name, was talking about making it augment decisions or helping you to make the decision, not making the decision for you, right? That's a huge thing. So our roadmap is really, we're using that. That's what we're using internally. That's what the federal civilian agencies are using. And it's what we're offering to you as something you should consider as a roadmap that you can use as well. And so it's on our website. You can check it out and you can go through it. You can look at all the work that we've done at the federal level and kind of possibly, model your roadmap after it. And again, at the end of the day, we just want you to be resilient. We want to be resilient. We think there's some really phenomenal impact that these tools can have. There's also some dangers, and we want to just mitigate those.
Great, I love it. Tools and resources for, once again, free, which is always a good thing. Tony, just want to check in with you about automated systems. So how about automated threat hunts or any other kind of, something that pops up an alert and then the person checks it out? What's your feeling about that? Is it beneficial?
Yeah. I mean, it is. At the end of the day, I mean, even us, almost everything that we build now from a Fortinet perspective has automation in it on the back end, right? There is no way we would be able to look. Like back in the day, if you remember, maybe 20 years ago, vendors could tout, I got 500 analysts, I got 1,000 analysts kind of looking at this malware problem. It doesn't matter now how many analysts you have. You cannot handle all of the different types of malware and be able to make sense. Is it malicious or is it benign? You have to be leveraging AI in the back end for that. Our EDR technology, everybody's EDR technology is doing that first level analysis. It's doing that automation on the back end to present some type of thing now that a real human analyst has to investigate. So there's value there. Now you bring it down to the battlefield, right? Battlefield meaning in the environment. Back in my day, again, it was best of breed. I wanted everything to be sort of separate. This particular product did this, and not a lot of it was interconnected. So it was about protection and best of breed. Now I think it's more about integrated platforms, detection, and automated response. So you have to make sure, and I'm assuming, but I probably shouldn't assume, in your strategy as you're building your stack, for the detection, for the response capabilities, all of those different technologies have to be able to somehow, some way integrate with each other so they can take action on your behalf. What you want to do, and I remember I used to, I had a, kind of a company before, and, I did 24/7 monitoring. This is way back when, and I would send out an alert, and I said, okay, well, here's the alert, and my customer would come back and say, well, what do I do? Oh, well, you do this, and this. I don't know how to do that. Nowadays, when you get an alert, you should be getting, hey, I've identified these 5, machines. There was some injected kind of code into this process. I blocked this process. It's done something for you. It gives you time to fight through the attack, and you can figure out what's going on by minimizing the overall impact of that particular threat. So the long-winded way of me saying there is value in automation there, but you just have to realize it's a combination of automation, leveraging that, latest and greatest technology, and the human analyst. If you vary one way or the other, you're going to fail every single time. So don't fall into the trap of the vendor marketing saying this thing is amazing, it's going to solve all your problems, because it's not. It's a combination that's going to solve the problem.
All right, I love it.
I would agree with that, because I think that's a really important point when we talk about AI. It's really about augmenting our abilities, right? As the human beings behind the keyboard with AI, that's where you really have the powerful connection, because AI by itself, sometimes you get some really weird results, right? If you played around with it, you'll see that you'll be like, okay, that's not what I asked for. But you'll get some really good stuff. And the power is our creativity, our ingenuity, and paired with that, right? So that's where you're going to see some really benefits.
Well, we have the luxury of having a lightning round for your final thoughts on this topic. And I think, Don, you just set us up for something that would be an interesting topic to discuss. And that is, what do you see over the next 3 to 5 years? How do you see cybersecurity developing? And what do you think the next steps are in the approach, especially with AI and ML and all these advanced technologies coming on board? Eudora?
I see generative AI helping in identifying risk faster, assessing it faster, being able to be a force multiplier for your cybersecurity team in strategic places. And as more vendors are coming onto the playing field that are compliant, that are safe and secure, and they can prove it, meaning, FedRAMP, and they are, part of a government environment, and they meet all of these different frameworks across the world, not just America, but all countries are actually racing to make sure that these standards are in place and these requirements at a governmental and legislative level are there to protect and against bias, AI poisoning, and protections.
So this is the part where I have to say this is my personal opinion. It has nothing to do with CISA, because that's what the question was what I think. So this is not what CISA thinks, is what I think. I think that one of the things that we're going to learn is that AI is going to become much more a part of our lives, just like our cell phones became a part of our lives. If you're old like me, remember back in the 90s when you had a pager and then you had to go find a payphone, right? Nowadays, that's not even an issue. I don't even know where a payphone is. Wouldn't even know how to use one if I found one. So it's become that way. And somebody else mentioned earlier, email, same thing, right? It was a novelty, oh, I have an AOL address, right? And now it's like everybody has multiple email addresses and we are tired of getting email. But I think that one of the things we're going to have to do with AI is also deal with education on a level, right? Somebody was talking about their kids using AI for homework, right? There's going to be some ethical questions that are going to come up about this, and we're going to have to deal with those. And not a lot of people are talking a lot about the ethical. Some folks are, but we're going to have to talk about that. But then we're also going to have to talk about, what's a responsible use of it? Right? Now, yes, there's a concern for the bias aspect of it, but, generating all your homework, that's inappropriate, right? Now, there's the argument on the other side, well, if I have the generative AI tools when I'm in the office, then I can use them and it's no different. I'm smart enough to figure out to get the right answer out of it. So there's going to be some questions there, and education is going to be a part of it. And I know me and Eudora were talking the other day, and we were geeking out talking about all the cool stuff that's out there. Because what I've seen in the market, and mind you, AI is not that advanced, and it does some things that you just scratch your head with and that's not appropriate. But it's been doing some really amazing things. And so I think it's only going to get better. And obviously and hopefully it gets more secure, and we make sure we bake that in from the beginning. And if we don't, we're just going to see more problems with it, right? So I am not giving you the future's going to be like this. It's going to be either this way or this way, depending upon how we manage it going
Will
forward.
probably be both ways, or a way we did not expect. That seems to be the case. Well, you get the final word, Tony.
I'm going to flip the script a little bit. I'm going to come from the offensive side of things again, and how, it might, help, from an adversarial perspective. I think we need to, I'm sure we all know that, ransomware as a service, what have you, it's usually a 1-2 punch. You have the affiliate programs and you have the ransomware as a service groups that are developing the malware and the playbooks, and they're kind of sharing that with the affiliates, and the affiliates are selling the initial access, over, or they're, combining with the ransomware as a service groups to actually complete the ransomware cyber mission, right? I think, a couple things. One, from a, prediction perspective, it takes time for the affiliate groups to be able to get their team educated enough to run through an adversarial playbook. It's now becoming a lot easier, because as long as we continue, and I think we're going to continue to see this, is valid credentials being used for initial access, it reduces the barrier of entry for affiliates to be able to come into the environment. So I think we're going to continue to see more, groups kind of pop up, more affiliates kind of pop up. So I think the ransomware service is going to get better. I'd also say that I think the ransomware sort of groups, nation state actors, they have a lot of this stuff already. But I think the generative AI and all those things, it allows for, some of the cracked versions allow for you to quickly be able to build an evasion technique for a particular technology, right? And be able to discover new ways a lot faster to be able to circumvent some of the latest and greatest technology that's coming out. EDRs are amazing. That's one of my, favorite technologies. I think if you're going to invest in something, EDR you have to have, but there are tons of ways to be able to circumvent, EDRs. It was last year or the year before, you kind of see where, adversaries are kind of taking, a particular vulnerable system driver, and they're finding out which one that is. They're loading it. It loads into kernel memory, right? And when they can exploit it, it gives them admin access, and then from there they can kind of turn off the actual kind of EDRs and whatnot. It's going to become more and more easier to be able to do things like that. So I think, from an evasion perspective, so it goes back to, well, what does that mean from a defender perspective? What it means is you do is everything that you can to be able to protect your environment, but you're going to get hit. And it's a matter of not if you're hit, it's when you do get hit, how quickly can you identify that adversary and take some type of response action to contain it and get any of those actual business processes back up and running again. That is how I think we're going to continue to be measured over time, because you're going to have to, because they're going to get in and they're going to be able to evade these things that we put in place.
I also like to contend that there's a lot of cybersecurity vendors out there that are baking in these generative AI tools to battle them.
Yeah.
Just will to will there. They're baking just as fast. Can you imagine a tool that, because of generative AI, it's the tool scanning your systems, and it finds a vulnerability, and it on the fly creates a new code to patch that vulnerability real time, right this second, within 5 minutes. I mean, wouldn't that be insane? But those are the types of things that vendors are looking at, and they're trying to develop to combat the whole commercialized generative AI LLMs that are out there that have the guardrails off for the bad guys to totally attack us. So
We're going to have to leave it there. And thank you very much. This has been an incredible panel. I know I learned a tremendous amount. Thank you so much for your time. You've been wonderful. As have you. Thank you so much for attending today. We really appreciate your comments. Don't forget to give your comments cards to our team outside so that you can get your parking validated. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been our pleasure to join you today. Have a great evening. And don't forget, tacos outside with some beverages. We would love to see you.
Thanks for listening, and thank you to our guests, Eudora Fleischman, Donald Hester, and Tony Giandomenico. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Caracast, and be sure to listen to our other discussions. If you'd like more information on how Carasoft can assist your organization, please visit www.carasoft.com or email us at slgmarketing@carasoft.com. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.